Now for the second segment of this course, which is how to enter cell values in Microsoft Excel. And let's say I work for a small business and I've been asked to create a payroll spreadsheet for the employees. Here in column A, I'd like to have the employee ID numbers. In column B, the employee names, and then some information about their wages, the hours worked, how much they are owed, etc. And anytime in Excel, when you want to enter data into a cell, it's important to first select that cell. There's a saying that I heard once that I use over and over, which is select to affect. If I want to affect this spreadsheet, if I want to affect the data in the spreadsheet, first I have to select something. So I want to affect A1, so I'll select it. Just by clicking on it once, I can now affect it by typing. So let's say the employee ID number for employee 1 is simply 1. I type the number 1 and that data appears in the cell, but it's not truly entered in the cell until I tap enter or return on the keyboard. Now the data is inside that cell. Notice when I tapped enter, the active cell moved down 1, and that's great because that's where I want to type the next number. 2, enter, 3, enter, 4, enter, and I could just continue to do this down the spreadsheet. But that is kind of a repetitive task, and Excel has a built-in feature to make it so it's not so repetitive. There's something called the fill handle or the autofill handle in Microsoft Excel. And the way it works is that it's been set up to identify patterns and then to extend those patterns. So I want to show Excel the pattern that is developing here. The pattern is adding 1 to the previous number. So 1, 2, 3, 4. The pattern is clear. I'm just adding 1. So if I click and drag to select that range, A1 through A4, the pattern should be clear. Now I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can see this a little better. But if you look in the lower right corner of this range that I've selected, you'll see a little green square. That's what we call the autofill handle or the fill handle. If I put my mouse pointer directly on that little green square, notice that the mouse pointer becomes a black plus sign. Now if I click and hold the click, I can drag down the spreadsheet. I'm going to go all the way to 70. And then I can release the mouse button and look what it does. Excel automatically extended the pattern that I showed it. Next, I'm going to click on cell B1 because I want to affect that cell. And I'll type the name of the first employee. And then I'll tap enter. And again, the active cell moves down the spreadsheet. I can type the next employee name, and I'm just going to use first names so that this goes faster, and the third name. Now you'll notice I misspelled one of the names. This is supposed to be James, not Jams. So this gives me the opportunity to teach you a very important concept in Microsoft Excel, and that is the difference between clicking on a cell and clicking in a cell. When you click on a cell once, the whole cell is selected. So if I click on Jams and I try to fix this so that it says James, the first letter I type will erase whatever the contents of that cell already is. So that's what happens when you click on a cell and type. It erases everything that's already there. Well, what if I've got 5 or 6 words in this cell and only one word is misspelled? I don't want to have to retype all of it. So instead of clicking on the cell, I'm going to double click on the cell, and that gets me inside the cell. Now you can see my flashing cursor, and I can use the arrow keys to move that cursor to exactly the right place, and then I can type and fix the misspelled word. Then I can tap enter on the keyboard, and that correction is entered into the cell. Now as you're entering data into Excel, every time you tap enter, the active cell should move down. But what if you need to move up? You can hold the shift key and tap enter, and that should move you up the spreadsheet. Give me a few seconds to finish entering names, and then I'll resume. Now that I've finished my list of names, I'm going to click here on cell B1 because I need to show you, in addition to moving down the spreadsheet by tapping enter and up the spreadsheet by using shift enter, you can move right and left by using the tab key. So if I tap tab, I move to the right. Now I'm on cell C1 and I can type in the hourly wage of Julia. If I need to move to the left, you can probably guess what keys I need to press. Shift tab moves me to the left. So enter is down, shift enter is up, tab is to the right, shift tab is to the left. So I'm going to tab over to cell D1 and I'll put in the number of hours Julia has worked in this month, 160. I'll tab over. The next thing we need to learn about entering cell values in Excel is how to clear and copy cell contents. So we've already looked at how to edit them. by double clicking, but what if you just need to copy the contents of one cell to another cell? You can click on a cell, or even a range if you prefer, and then hold the Control key and tap C to copy. Now there are other ways to do this. You could go to the Home tab, and you could click this button here to copy the contents of cell C1 in this case. It's also possible to right-click, copy, but in most cases, simply using Control C to copy and Control V to paste is going to be your fastest way to copy paste. So I could just keep pasting in the number 15 in each of these cells, but remember we have a tool called the autofill handle, and it's great to avoid the repetitive entering of data. So now, with just cell C5 selected, what is the pattern that the autofill handle is going to see? The only pattern I'm showing it is one number. If I click on the autofill handle and pull down the spreadsheet all the way down to the bottom, it's going to extend that pattern of just the number 15, and it basically copies that same number all the way down the page. So that's a shortcut that we can use. But what if this number isn't accurate for all of these employees? Maybe Amelia is making more than $15 an hour. I could click on that cell and just overwrite it with another number, tap enter, and that's a very fast way to do it. But there are times when you need to not only delete the information that's there by either overwriting it or tapping the delete key or backspace key on the keyboard, but sometimes you need to completely clear everything that's in that cell, not just the data, but maybe also the formatting and other information. You can do that a couple of different ways. One is to right-click on the cell and choose Clear Contents, but one of my favorite ways is to select the cell or range of cells, and then go up here to the Home tab. On the Home ribbon in the Editing group, we have this button. And if you click the arrow next to the button, you can clear all, or just clear the formats, contents, hyperlinks, etc. I'll click Clear All, and everything is completely wiped clean out of that range. I'll hold Control and tap Z to undo that, but it's important that you know about that feature. Now, as I'm building this spreadsheet, I'm realizing it's going to be hard for me to remember exactly what each of these columns of data represents. 15 what? 16 what? 160 what? I should have put in column titles or headings. So let's look at how to insert new rows and columns into Excel. If I need another blank row above row number 1, what can I do? Well, all I have to do is right-click on the number 1 and choose Insert. If I need a new blank column, all I need to do is right-click on, let's say, column A and choose Insert, and I get a column to the left of column A. I can also insert columns in between data, so I'll right-click on D, Insert, now I get a blank column between C and now E, and I could do the same with rows. I'm going to undo all of that to get back to this point where I just have a new blank row above my data. And I'll click here on cell A1 and I'll call this Employee ID. I'll use Tab to move over to cell B1 and I'll type Name. I'll use Tab to go over to C1 and I'll type Hourly Wage, and I'll tap Tab to move over to D1 and I'll type Hours Worked. I'll tab over to E1 and type Taxable Income. At this point I'll tap Enter on the keyboard. Now I understand a lot better what all of the data in these columns is about. Now you probably noticed that not all of my data in row number 1 actually fits inside the columns. For example, in C1, hourly wage doesn't really fit in the space I have provided for it. So let's look at how to fix that. I could click and hold the click between the letter C and the letter D, column C and D. And then I could drag that column to make it so the text fits. And I could do the same with column A, column D, column E. But let me show you a faster way. If I click and drag across from A all the way to E, actually clicking on the column letters, and then if I double click between any two of these column letters, let's say between B and C, I'll double click. What happens is all of the columns are resized to the perfect width so that the data that's inside those columns will fit. That looks a lot better. Now, as I'm entering data in Excel, from time to time, I may need a little help with that. For example, let's say that the standard hourly wage increases from $15 an hour to $15.50 an hour. How could I quickly update all of this information? One way to do that would be to use Find and Replace. So here in Excel, if I go to the Home tab on the Home ribbon, in the Editing group, you'll find Find and Select. You may see the text or you may just have a magnifying glass. If you click on the arrow next to that, notice that there's an option for Find and there's also Replace. I'm going to select Replace, and this lets me find what, let's say 15, and replace it with 15.5. And I'll select Replace All. All done, we made 70 replacements. I click OK and close. You'll notice that all of the 15s have been turned into 15.5. Now there is one problem with that. Notice employee ID number 15